أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك أستغيث لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. So today we'll be looking at the concept of the origin of life. I'll be using Dr. Maurice Bucaille's What is the Origin of Man? He initially describes DNA, Darwinian and Lamarckian evolution, and the concept of life from a biological perspective, and then also compares the Bible and the Qur'an. So I would just simply like to lay out some ayahs, some verses he mentions, and we will look at those respective ayahs verse by verse, and inshallah we will not only gain more insight into the concept of life and how the Quran outlines and points towards life, but how this can be applicable in our day-to-day conversation, especially with the fact that atheism and secularism is on the rise, as well as Islam gaining prominence amongst the youth as well. So it's extremely important. It's one's imperative actually to understand the concept of life from an Islamic paradigm. So Maurice Bucaille speaks about the origin of life in the following way. The Quran provides a clear-cut answer to the question, at what point did life begin? In this section, I shall set forth the verses of the Quran in which it is stated that the origin of life are aquatic. The first verse also refers to the formation of the universe. So he points to Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 30, so that is chapter 21, verse number 30. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أولم ير الذين كفروا أن السماوات والأرض كانتا رتقا ففتقناهما وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي أفلا يؤمنون صدق الله العظيم. So in English, this approximates as, do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one unit of creation before we clove them asunder? We made from water every living thing. Will they not then believe? Fascinating ayah, simply because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about life and living things being originated from water, and water plays a central role in our everyday life, whether it's cleaning, drinking, managing our day-to-day hygiene, so on and so forth. So it's not a mistake, and this is not a haphazard situation we're in, okay? And just to read the footnotes of Abdullah Yusuf Ali, we look at footnote number 2690. The evolution of the ordered worlds as we see them is hinted at. As man's intellectual gaze over the physical world expands, he sees more and more how unity is the dominating note in Allah's wonderful universe. Taking the solar system alone, we know that the maximum intensity of sunspots corresponds with the maximum intensity of magnetic storms on this earth. The universal law of gravitation seems to bind all mass together. Physical facts point to the throwing off of planets from vast quantities of diffused nebular matter, of which the central condensed core is a sun. So The idea here is that the concept of unity is what's dominating our world. When we look at the sky, it's the sun in and of itself that aids life and habitat is able to survive on planet Earth. And then at night, we see how the moon plays a pivotal role with respect to navigation through the stars and also through understanding which month we're approaching, as we're in Shaban at the moment, and Ramadan will commence within the next week and a half or so, inshallah. So looking at the moon, we are able to determine which day and which month we are in. So the concept of unity is very powerful, and this reminded me of Hebbian connections or Hebbian learning theory, which is a concept developed by a neuroscientist named Hebb, where he says that one neuron connects to another, and this long chain of neurons, if you wish to imagine a chain, a long link, allows us to consolidate memories, adapt ourselves to the environment, recognize the environment, and also give our brain the opportunity to be plastic and mold itself with respect to new information and recalling old information. So it's really powerful, this ayah. The next footnote I would like to mention here is 2691. About 72% of the surface of our globe is still covered with water, and it has been estimated that if the inequalities of the surface were all leveled, the whole surface would be underwater, as the mean elevation of land sphere level would be 7 to 10,000 feet below the surface of the ocean. And Surah Hud ayah 7 is mentioned here. So this shows the predominance of water on our globe. That all life began in the water is also a conclusion to which our latest knowledge in biological science points. Apart from the fact that protoplasm, the original basis of living matter, is liquid or semi-liquid and in a state of constant flux and instability, there is the fact that land animals, like the higher vertebrates, including man, show in their embryological history organs like those of fishes, indicating the watery origin of their original habitat. The constitution of protoplasm is about 80 to 85% water. And then what's fascinating is Surah Nur, verse 45 is mentioned here. So that's chapter 24, verse 45. We'll touch on this before we go back to Dr. Maurice's book. So chapter 24, verse 45, which is the following. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والله خلق كل دابة من ماء فمنهم من يمشي على بطنه ومنهم من يمشي على رجلين ومنهم من يمشي على أربع يخلق الله ما يشاء إن الله على كل شيء قدير. So this approximates to English as, and Allah has created every animal from water. Of them are some that creep on the bellies, some that walk on two legs, and some that walk on four. Allah creates what He wills, for verily Allah has power over all things. Kulli shay'in qadir. So this is quite powerful, because when I read creep on their bellies, I imagine insects and sea lions. Some that walk on two legs, you can think of ostriches, us human beings, and those on four, like a beautiful black jaguar. So this diversity exists, but despite that, every animal has been created from water. Even in neuroscience, for instance, when we study incredible creatures that Allah has created, such as the owl monkeys, spider monkeys, macaque monkeys, chimpanzees, silverback gorilla, so on and so forth, despite the similarities in brain structure and behaviors and certain characteristics and how in-group, out-group behavior seems to be similar, the concept of dominance and the hierarchy of dominance in a particular group between, for example, the strongest gorilla that exists in that group as compared to a human being that's a leader. So these similarities and intricacies do exist. Excuse me. However, we are still created from the same component, which is water. The most controversial aspect here, however, is that Darwinian evolution and Lamarckian evolution, but more neo-Darwinian evolution, tries to push this concept down our throat from a very young age that we originated from other animals, various species, and man was able to descend from said other animals, most notably the apes. And that is the most ridiculous and most nonsensical thing one could come up with. But of course, it was spearheaded by colonists from the previous century. One of those characters is Huxley. You can read the history of how he was able to leverage his position at UNESCO and move ahead with this. And not just that, even scientists to this day cannot go against conventional science. In fact, their career is under threat, and their overall name in the field of science is under threat. There's a fascinating documentary on this, and Brother Sabur Ahmed, who has done incredible work in evolution and philosophy as well, the Dawah scene, he speaks about this in great detail. So, going back to Dr. Maurice, regarding chapter 21, verse 30, he says, "The notion of getting something out of something else does not give rise to any doubts. The phrase can equally mean that every living thing was made of water, or that every living thing originated in water." So it's an essential component. The two possible meanings are strictly in accordance with scientific data. Life is in fact of aquatic origin, and water is in the major component of all living cells. Without water, life is not possible. When the possibility of life on another planet is discussed, first question is always, is there a sufficient quantity of water to support life? For example, on Mars, that's one of the key aspects of proving that life does exist on Mars. The word translated here as water is in fact ma', which means both water in the sky and water in the sea, or any kind of liquid. In the first meaning, water is the element necessary of all vegetal life. So he now mentions Surah Taha, verse 53, which is chapter number 20, verse number 53. Quite a fascinating verse, actually. So, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim, chapter 20, verse 53. الذي جعل لكم الأرض مهدا وسلك لكم فيها سبلا وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرجنا به أزواجا من نبات شتى. So this approximates to English as, "He who has made for you the earth like a carpet spread out has enabled you to go about therein by roads and channels, and has sent down water from the sky. With it have we produced diverse pairs of plants, each separate from the others." So what's fascinating is that now we have botanics entering the conversation of life. So regarding footnote number 2576, Sabil means not only a road but would include water roads or channels, and in modern conditions, airways. In fact, all means of communication. Next, we have footnote 2577. This seems to be outside the speech of Moses and connects itself with the following verses 54 to 56 as part of the word of Allah, expanding the speech of Moses and explaining the working of Allah's providence in nature. Lastly, footnote number 2578, Azwaj, we might translate here as in chapter 15 verse 88 by classes instead of pairs, but as sex in plants seems to be referred to elsewhere. Chapter 13 verse 3, I translate pairs. So Azwaj, the word could mean pairs or it could mean classes. So as we know, for example, when in terms of life, you have life, domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So this is how it's conventionally classified when looking at organisms and different classes of animals. Dr. Maurice here says, this is the first reference to a pair of vegetals. So now focus here is pairs. We shall have cause to return to this notion later. In the second meaning, which refers to any kind of liquid, the word is used in its indeterminate form to designate the substance at the basis of the formation of all animal life. Chapter 24 verse 45 is now being referred to. So Surah Nur, chapter 45, which we had mentioned earlier, but here is just a smaller portion that Dr. Maurice points to, which is أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والله خلق كل دابة من ماء صدق الله العظيم. God created every animal from water. As we shall see later on, the word may also be applied to seminal liquid, which is quite interesting. And this is secreted by the reproductive glands. The seminal liquid contains the spermatozoa. So spermatozoa is from the males, of course, and this allows life to be created once for example, in the case of humans, the sperm reaches the female's egg and it's fertilized, and from there on the fetus comes into existence, and from that point the formation of the head, the gut, spinal cord, skin, bones, so on and so forth. And that is also mentioned in the Qur'an in terms of the exact stages. And there has been incredible work by Keith Moore, an authority when it comes to the field of embryology, who has spoken about this in extensive detail. And I actually came across this information when watching and hearing Dr. Zakir Naik, and definitely a legend in the game, and inshallah may Allah preserve him. Ameen. Thus the statements of the Quran in the origins of life, whether referring to life in general, the element that gives birth to the plants in the soil, or the seed of animals, are all strictly in accordance with modern scientific data. None of the myths on the origins of life that abounded at the time the Quran was communicated to man are mentioned in the text. Now, next is the perpetuation of life. Okay, the Quran refers to many aspects of life in the animal and vegetable kingdoms. In the present study, I would like to focus on the space given in the Quran to the theme of the perpetuation of life. So now the perpetuation of life is about to be highlighted. Generally speaking, the commentaries devoted to reproduction in the vegetable kingdom are longer than those referring to animal reproduction. When it comes to human reproduction, however, there are many statements dealing with this theme, as we shall see. It has been established that there are two methods of reproduction in the vegetable kingdom: sexual and asexual. For example, the multiplication of spores, or the process of taking cuttings, which is a special case of growth. It is noteworthy that the Quran refers to male and female parts of the vegetals. So now, once again, pointing to Surah Taha, ayah number 53, which is chapter 20, verse 53. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرجنا به أزواجا من نبات شتى. So this is the last part of the ayah. One of a pair is a translation of zawj, and plural is azwaj, as we just spoke a few moments ago, whose original meaning is that which in the company of another forms a pair. The word may just as readily be applied to a married couple as to a pair of shoes. Interesting. So in a sense, subhanallah, think about it, how plants exist with the prerequisite of the seed being sown in the ground. Likewise, the male human sperm is seen as a seed that enters into the fertile ground, which is the womb, and that allows the process of gestation and the process of birth to occur, and therefore conscious experience. So life literally doesn't begin, in my opinion, once the sperm hits the egg and it's confirmed in terms of pregnancy. The process is about to begin. So that's why it's extremely important that the sexual appetite is controlled, especially that of a man and of course the woman. And in today's hyper-sexualized society, that is one of the biggest fitna. Fitna meaning trial. So, Surah Ar-Ra'd, chapter number 3 is quoted here. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وهو الذي مد الأرض وجعل فيها رواسي وأنهارا ومن كل الثمرات جعل فيها زوجين اثنين يغشي الليل النهار إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون. صدق الله العظيم. So this approximates to English as, and it is He, Allah, who spread out the earth and set thereon mountains standing firm, and flowing rivers, and fruit of every kind He made in pairs, 2 and 2. He draweth the night as a veil over the day. Behold, verily in these things there are signs for those who consider. So now Allah is pointing our attention at how the earth has been spread, and there are mountains that set firm on said earth, right? And how there are rivers flowing and there are fruits of every kind. Interesting how flowing of rivers, i.e. water, is playing a role here, and of course fruit, seeds, growth, sexual, asexual production, such as with oranges and apples. Fascinating historical side note. During the 20th century, the Soviets had a separate field of genetic studies, and one of the main forerunners, he actually wrote about the various genetic variations in apples. And to this day, there is a specific type of apple that is still grown in Russia because of that man's studies in genetics and reproduction of the apple seed. So it's an interesting thing and fact. And Allah says, of every kind He made in pairs 2 and 2. He draweth the night as a veil, as a covering, over the day. Interesting. Behold, verily in these things there are signs for those who consider. So, considering this, we'll go to footnote number 1804, which is Abdullah Yusuf Ali says, I think that this refers to sex in plants, and I see MP Marmaduke Pickthall, famous Englishman who became Muslim, has translated accordingly. Plants, like animals, have their reproductive apparatus, male stamens and female pistils. In most cases, the same flower combines both stamens and pistils, but in some cases, these organs are specialized in separate flowers, and in some cases, even in separate trees. The date palm of Arabia and the papaya of India are instances of fruit trees which are unisexual. So, the date palm of Arabia and the papaya are unisexual. Wow, that's fascinating to learn first time. The role of fruits is amazing in and of itself. The various colors, the flavorings, and the manner in which they are grown and sustained. One of my favorite fruits are the cherries. And cherries, there are many kinds of cherries. I like the sweet and sour ones, and I also love strawberries. But when you observe how they are planted and compare them to dry fruits like dates, for example, it's amazing how all of this did not happen by chance or randomness or some arbitrary evolutionary process. There has been intelligent design that had initiated this process for it to continually happen. And scientists to this day don't know how the first seed came into existence, let alone explain the evolution of the plant kingdom. So, subhanallah, you can spend your whole life studying one species of animal, for example, one variation of a fruit or a herb, and your whole life just goes by. So, again, Abdullah Yusuf Ali mentions chapter 20, verse 53, which we just touched upon. And now he is speaking of chapter 31, verse 10. We'll touch on that and then we will go back to the last portion of Dr. Maurice's book here, Chapter 31, verse number 10. Okay. So we have here Surah Luqman. Luqman was one of the great messengers, one of the great prophets of Islam, and known as Luqman Hakim, Luqman the Wise. One of my favorite names, actually. So, we go to verse number 10 here. So, this is أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم خلق السماوات بغير عماد ترونها وألقى في الأرض رواسي أن تميد بكم وبث فيها من كل دابة وأنزلنا من السماء ماء فأنبتنا فيها من كل زوج كريم. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. I think I may have misread something here. May Allah forgive me. That's just my instant feeling. But in any case, this approximates to English as He created the heavens without any pillars that ye can see. He set on the earth mountains standing firm, lest it should have shake with you, and He scattered through it beasts of all kind. Again, animal kingdom being mentioned here. We send down rain, again water, from the sky, and produce on the earth every kind of noble creature in pairs. So we can again instantly see how animals, water, and plants seem to be concurring with each other. There is a parallel theme when it comes to origin of life and creation, where animals and plants together with water being mentioned. And we know of the hadith of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Sidratul Muntaha, one of the shajars, one of the trees in Jannah, there are three major streams that are stretching from Jannah to planet Earth, and they are the River Nile in Egypt, my favorite country. Second is the Euphrates near Iraq. Inshallah, I hope and pray to go there. And third one is Gihon Springs in occupied Palestine, which inshallah I also pray to visit. So the River Nile, Euphrates, and the Gihon Springs, these are the three main bodies of water. Now the question is, how are they being traveled down from the heaven, which none of us can see? Because Allah mentioned that He created the heavens without any pillars. So clearly they are way above our conscious perception. And from there, the water sources exist on planet Earth. There are no pipes, there's no filters or tunnels that we can see. So clearly there may be some form of multi-dimensional phenomena going on here. Now, I'm not suggesting this is definite, but this is a probability, a strong possibility in fact, that this exists. And I'm personally inclined towards that idea that there are multi-dimensional aspects of this world. What we see is not the final picture. As I discussed this in my previous video, Islam and the philosophy of neuroscience, where sensation and perception is not necessarily all that you see. Because, for instance, there are jinn that exist, and there are angels and malaika that exist as well. So the more one steps into this, the more one can just be completely lost in a good way. And just finishing here with respect to the footnotes by Abdullah Yusuf Ali, we look at footnote number 3589, and this is referring us to Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 164. Next is 3590 states, note the change of the pronoun at this stage in the verse. Before this, Allah has spoken of in the third person, He, and the acts of creation referred to were acts that in the main were completed when the universe as we see it came into being. Through its slow age-long evolution, though its slow age evolution continues. That's correct. It's constantly evolving. After this, Allah speaks in the first person, we, the plural of honor. So we send down rain. The plural of honor, as explained before in chapter 2 verse 38, and the processes spoken of are those that go continually before us, as in the case of rain and the growth of the vegetable kingdom. In some way, the creation of the heavens and the earth and animal life on it may be considered impersonal to man, while the processes of rain and vegetation may be considered in a special personal relationship to him. So there might not be a very intimate relationship between us and, for example, the animal life and the creation of the heavens, but they seem to be personal when it comes to the process of rain and vegetation. I mean, to a degree, animal life can be personal, not just from a pet's perspective, but from a dietary perspective as well. You have the carnivore diet these days, which to a large degree I also follow: eggs, beef, chicken, some vegetables here and there, and fruits. So that's quite fascinating. And I'm intrigued to know what is mentioned in chapter 2, verse 164. And why not check it out? So, chapter 2, verse 164 is the following: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار والفلك التي تجري في البحر بما ينفع الناس وما أنزل الله من السماء من ماء فأحيا به الأرض بعد موتها وبث فيها من كل دابة وتصريف الرياح والسحاب بالمسخر بين السماء والأرض لآيات لقوم يعقلون. So in English this approximates as: Behold in the creation of the heavens and the earth, in the alternations of the night and the day, in the sailing of the ships through the ocean for the profit of mankind, in the rain which Allah sends down from the skies and the life which He gives therewith to an earth that is dead, in the beast of all kinds that He scatters through the earth, in the change of the winds and the clouds which they trail like their slaves. Between the sky and the earth, here indeed are signs for people that are wise. So this constant pointing towards the incredible architecture, if you want to call it, and the intelligent design of Allah when it comes to the night, day, animals, vegetables, humans, plants, and all of this contributes to nature's operation essentially. And there is mention in this ayah of winds and the whole cycle of life with the sun and the moon playing a part, and quantum physics, theoretical physics, astronomers, geologists, meteorologists, they allow us to uncover these quote-unquote mysteries that Allah has put out there by simply pointing and highlighting an aspect and using deductive reasoning to go towards the more varied and intricate details that exist in our planet. So it's quite incredible, subhanallah, how Allah has done this. So in terms of the comments put forth by Dr. Maurice, again he points to chapter 13 verse 3, which is Surah Ra'd verse 3, the part where it speaks about fruits and how Allah has created them in pairs. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَمِن كُلِّ الثَّمَرَاتِ جَعَلَ فِيهَا زَوْجَيْنِ اثْنَيْنِ. So ithnain, two, and the fact that they are pairs in this case. Dr. Maurice says this statement implies the existence of male and female organs in all various species of fruit. It is in perfect agreement with the data discovered at a much later period concerning the formation of fruit. For every type comes from vegetables possessing sexual organs, even if certain varieties such as banana originate from non-fertilized flowers. Technically, banana is a herb as far as I know. By and large, sexual reproduction in the animal kingdom is given only brief treatment in the Qur'an. The exception to this is man? For as we shall see in the following chapter, the statements on this subject are numerous and in detail. So, inshallah, next time we will cover in detail the origin of man and transformations of the human form over the ages. But I found this handful of pages being very, very unique in nature. How Dr. Maurice highlights these ayahs that one can literally spend weeks touching on and aiming at uncovering what Allah is indicating here. Of course, through the ages, man has made progress, whether it's Mendel with his studies on peas in terms of this field of genetics, and as I mentioned, these Soviet era genetic studies on, for example, apples. So, subhanAllah, the more we touch the Qur'an and the lenses we put on, that is what we see. And I certainly see mostly science and neuroscience. This might be my biased brain here, but inshallah, may Allah allow us to study and read and recite the Quran on a daily basis and improve our character. I'm certainly one of those who needs much improvement in many areas of my life as I mature in age, and may Allah forgive us for our inconsistencies, our errors, and I pray that you also accept my forgiveness if I had misquoted or misread something here. And certainly Allah is the best of all planners. He's the most gracious and the most merciful. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.